All right, folks. So, I've been working lately with some concentration practices, and I actually find it difficult to teach concentration. One of the main ways that I actually do concentration is just counting breaths. But the idea is to actually work actively to just sort of interrupt the thought thinking very quickly. So uh, it requires mindfulness, but it isn't the open kind of mindfulness where you're just sort of allowing whatever arises to come up. It's more being aware that the mind is wandering and coming back right away. But the counting breath practice, usually the way I do it is I talk to myself. And actually talking to yourself, is one of the ways that we, intentionally talking to yourself is one of the ways that we develop concentration. So, like a mantra, just repeating the phrase. But with the counting the breaths, I just say to myself, in on the in breath, and then the number on the out breath up to 10. So in, one, in, two, in, three. But it's not just that you're working from the neck up. There's also a real kind of, I think of it as kind of a dive into the body, a real, like just absorption into the felt experience of sitting and feeling all the energies in the body as you're counting the breaths. So this then has the both that cognitive element of the word and numbers in the mind, and then the you know, somatic element of body. So there's really we're trying to develop a kind of absorption where we're really completely inside this experience. So it kind of doesn't allow anything else to get in. Now, the third element, so there's the cognitive element and the somatic element, and there needs to also be the skillful effort or the wise effort, which means that there's no sense of grasping or kind of expecting anything to happen. There's no judgment if it doesn't work. There's very much a sense of acceptance of whatever arises as we're practicing. So I'm going to let this be a mostly quiet sit. I might, come back and interrupt occasionally, but mostly just suggest that you try this, that you count within and then the number up to 10, and then you go back to 1. If you lose track of the numbers, you just go back to 1. Don't try to figure out where you were. If you go up to 11 or 14, as soon as you know that, you just come back to 1. And then just to reiterate that really, very strong sense of being in the body, just feeling, letting the whole energetic experience, the whole somatic experience absorb the mind. So each of us breathes at our own pace. So I'm not going to count your breaths for you. I'll let you work with that for a little while. Keeping your practice very simple, just counting breaths, absorbing into the body. As you count breaths, there's awareness of the sensations, not just the numbers, but the felt experience of the breath in and out, and the absorption into the body deepens with the out breath. I feel a little guilty when I do that. Don't don't give a lot of guide, like ongoing guidance. Like I guess I feel like I'm supposed to take care of everybody while you're meditating, but you know, sometimes I just have to let go. Um, you know, and one of the reasons, really, the reason that I started working on this week was because that can really be a, you can use concentration practices as a sort of uplifting uh, for the mood state, and I guess it's another one of those things that sometimes it's difficult as a very experienced meditator and teacher to know um, if some of the things I want to kind of transmit are things that just really require more time to get there, and that um, but so I don't know, but but I find that I can sort of arouse a positive energy in my body, and then kind of intentionally have a sense of radiating that, kind of sort of filling myself up with it. It comes out of the suttas, and it in the in the teachings on concentration on jhana, the Buddha talks about filling your whole body with these different states. Um, the first one is piti, which is often translated as rapture. Uh, Lee Brasington likes the term glee. So it's a very bright, like, and sometimes when you start to feel that, it's like you find yourself grinning. If you ever find yourself grinning when you're meditating, or you can intentionally smile, and that will sometimes excite the grin, or it will sort of trigger the grin. But it's like a kind of, it's not like a normal grin. It's kind of like you know, your face gets kind of like locked. But and then but this then the second stage of that is sukha, which is just like a joy. But again, it's a very physical kind of feeling in the body of warmth and brightness, and my sense is that when we get those, when we start to generate those states, that we're getting chemical stuff happening, that we're getting like oxytocin going in the body, and or some one of those goodies that they talk about, people who know about those things. Um, and so, you know, it's quite remarkable to like just start to meditate and just sit there, and then, you know, find that you're like just moving into a better mood, basically. And it's like a, you know, even talking about it is risky, because it's like, wow, I can meditate and make myself feel happier. Uh, it's not something you can sort of necessarily turn on or turn off. Uh, and it takes sustained practice. And oftentimes, when I actually work on that, maybe I'm sitting for 45 minutes, and it'll be like the last 7 minutes that'll kind of kick in, and the rest of it is kind of somewhat grueling, because it isn't um, the sort of easeful effort of mindfulness where you're just like, okay, my mind wandered, gently come back. It's more like, really, okay, keep letting go, keep opening up, just and and then finally, kind of this glow kind of comes through. And so it's valuable and useful, but not something you want to devote all your practice to. Um, and I think probably the capacity to do it is developed more through retreats, and then we kind of develop those neural pathways that allow that to open up. Um, I, I guess I'd like to hear if there are any thoughts or questions about all of that, uh, or if it's just kind of whatever. If there, if anything came up for you guys, particularly just the, the meditation instructions, such as it was, how it was to work with that. Go ahead, Deborah.
For me, I've tried counting my breaths before, but your instruction to do in breath and then count, to breathe and then count, really helped me a lot. Tara Brach refers to the half smile of meditation. And I really felt that. I also had more physical awareness, maybe because I'd been working outside and then I came in and sat, and I have a nice open window. And so that was interesting. I'm not really usually that aware of my body during meditation. Um, and I forgot the other thing. Oh, the other thing was that I seem to notice my thoughts and noises during the in breath, and the number uh, stopped those things from happening, and I really enjoyed that too. So,
Right.
thank you very much.
Good. It sounds like you did it very skillfully. That I do think, you know, typically when this is taught, just the counting breaths, they don't talk about the body part, the body awareness, and I think that's a really important part of it, because if you just practice from your neck up, like I'm just gonna, breath, in counting and not thinking, then it just doesn't, it's not absorbing. I don't think being able to be just with the whole body, and then have that kind of, the breath kind of does that cleansing, like the number kind of like stops the thought, wipes out the thoughts, and then you kind of breathe again and feel the body, and then the number. It can be useful. Yeah. Rachel, hello. It must be Friday night in Berkeley.
You're right. And it's Saturday morning on Samui. So there's the old joke of how do you get to two with counting your breath. But I actually found this time, it's not a competition, but I was able to go much higher with the counting sequence that I normally can. And but I've been up like less than an hour. So I didn't experience the distractions. So I think that tells me that probably morning is a really good time to meditate. I think it's because the other distractions of the day hadn't come in. But I didn't stumble around, number 4, which is usually where my mind has jettisoned off to someplace else. So was a very pleasant experience. Thank you.
Good. What's the joke about getting to number 2?
So the Buddhist monk says in this practice we count up to 10 with our breath. Uh-huh. And one of the practitioners says, that's great, but how do you get to 2?
Oh.
Because you're so distracted that you can't get past 1.
You never get past 1. Yeah, I've been there for sure. All sounds good. There's also, variation where they say count to 8, because 10 is so rote that sometimes you can be like counting, but you're not really paying attention. And then, so it's good to have it, pick a number that you're going to that's not as sort of typical counting. How do you get to 2? I thought it was going to be one of those jokes about how do you get to Carnegie Hall, right? Practice. Right? So it's similar. How do you get to enlightenment? You practice. I don't know. Not quite, doesn't quite have the same humorous effect, but yeah, thank you. Yeah. Well, I do have. I can go back to the book, as Ringo would say. Has anybody been watching the Paul McCartney thing that's on Hulu? No. Okay. Well, there you go. There's a Paul McCartney thing on Hulu. He gets interviewed, but multiple interviews with Rick Rubin. It's kind of funny. Yeah, step 10. Oh, you know what? I wanted to tell you something else before I get into this, because I was talking to someone yesterday who was, talking to me about their program and using some of my books, and he's like, he had relapsed and just came back out of treatment, and I was like, well, you could use I also have this daily reflections book, and I said, so just for you guys, FYI, as they say, if you are interested in just kind of working the steps, the way I structured that book is that January is step 1, February is step 2, etc. And most of the like very step-oriented parts are in the beginning of each month. So if you want to go through the steps, draw from that book to go through the steps. The thing is just like go to kind of the beginning of the month and kind of look for because I try to alternate somewhat in there between just like a step thing and like a meditation thing and a Dharma thing, and so some of their are blends of one or two. But I just thought I'd mention that because I realized I didn't make that clear in that book that it can be used as a step study. So, okay. So step 10, which, we're not in the 10th month. We're just in the 10th step, in one breath at a time. And I missed Tuesday, and thank you, Debbie, for covering that day. Appreciate it. And so last Friday, I'm on like the section called "Admitting We're Wrong" on page 208. And last Friday, instead of drawing from this, I went into Suzuki Roshi's Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. This that I quote in here. I quote the one phrase: "One continuous mistake. Meditation can be called one continuous mistake." So I'm going to get back into this section, this admitting we're wrong section, and just go through some of the ideas in here. And first of all, the thing that was striking to me as I started to really integrate the steps into my life was how the experience of making amends or of admitting I'd made a mistake it changed so radically after I was sober for a while, and particularly after I had done inventory and written inventory, shared inventory, and then made amends. So that getting to step 10, this idea that we continued to take inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. Personal inventory. When we were wrong, promptly admitted it. This became appealing in a certain way. Not that, oh, great, I've done another stupid thing I have to admit, but that there's something very freeing about it. I just started to feel like it just allowed me to go through life with much more of a sense of fearlessness, because there wasn't, and I don't know if and there isn't the same feeling of having to protect my ego, that once I realized that it was okay to be flawed, to make mistakes, and that I could move on from those things, then there's much less fear in life. That feeling like, oh, I'm going to be found out, or the threat, the threat to ego is not something that I really felt consciously. But after I got sober and worked the steps, I realized how persistent it had been, that it had been like a real motivator in a lot of behavior, and particularly in in relationships, that refusal to take responsibility, essentially, and that feeling like you can't be wrong, and defensiveness and all that comes along with that. That was lifted to such an extent. It was really, as I say, really just a flip. What I say here in the first paragraph is, once I'd experienced the relief that came with steps 4 and 5, my attitude practically reversed. Once I saw how admitting I'd made a mistake could free me from the burden of having to defend the indefensible, I started to willingly offer my apologies. And then, I've talked about some experiences at work, which was, a perfect example of that. And again, I remember distinctly, like, immediately admitting when I realized I'd made a mistake to my boss or to a coworker. And first of all, that felt fine, but then also realizing one of the key things that's important about this is that if you don't admit you've made a mistake, you can't change it, you can't fix it, you can't grow. And so it's interesting that this is really clearly, this is not just something that people who work the steps understand. Anybody who really sort of develops in a skill or in relationships, it has to, way that we're going to really grow has to involve admitting mistakes and looking for how those can be corrected. So it's interesting. I was watching a baseball game today, as I will do when I am on the couch, and they're talking about how this pitcher had, like, the last time he had faced this batter, threw a fastball for the first pitch and the guy hit a home run, and oh, look, he's throwing curveballs and sliders to him this time. It's like, oh, right. If he didn't admit that he had made a mistake, if he wasn't willing to, no, that was a perfect good fastball, I can do that. Why shouldn't I throw a fastball? Don't tell me what to do. Just keep throwing fastballs and keep hitting them out, keep seeing them go over the wall. Just logical, right? But alcoholics, I mean, addicts, maybe we're not so logical in the ways we live. So another piece that I kind of land on in this, that I think gets at the spiritual element of this in the second chapter, is that it's that talking about admitting mistakes, but saying, but I didn't take it personally. And this is, of course, one of the highest spiritual principles, which is letting go of self-centeredness, or letting go of ego, and again, like defensiveness and protecting ego. So uh, so destructive. But whereas in the 12-step world, we talk about this in different terms, the idea of self-centeredness, or kind of thinking about uh, not just not focusing on self. Whereas in the Buddhist world, we take it further and say that we actually look at what it is that we think self is and realize that it's empty, that there isn't really something there to protect, which, really definitely takes us another step, and is, really fascinating, and again, incredibly freeing. That the typical response of somebody who hears this Buddhist teaching for the first time, or sort of like hanging around or reading a book, it's like, what? There's no self? That's terrible. What do you mean? I don't. I lost myself. Uh, but with this insight and understanding, instead is this sense of, oh, this. It's not that is there a self? Is there not a self? The Buddha actually never said there's no self. He just pointed to a lot of different things that we think are self and said that's not it. And the idea isn't like, okay, I don't have a self. Okay, now what? It's just that look at the ways that you are defending something that doesn't really have any substance, and look at what happens when you don't do that, when you don't try to promote yourself or protect yourself or worry about self. That just how freeing that is. Um, so it's interesting. I'm getting like one idea per paragraph here. The next paragraph has this phrase, one of my favorites. This sense of welcoming criticism, as the Buddha says, being easy to admonish, is so freeing. So this term, easy to admonish, shows up in the suttas quite a bit. I think in the sutta study class we've run into it. Easy to admonish. I mean, it's typically, admonish isn't a term that probably most of us use in our daily conversations, but it's a very evocative term, to be admonished. And we see these situations in the suttas where one of the monks does something unwise or unskillful, and the Buddha will, criticize him, and he can be pretty tough. As much as we think of the Buddha as being compassionate, that doesn't mean he's always nice. He can be pretty tough on people. And there's that one scene. I think of them as scenes where the monk lied about Sariputta hitting him, and after Sariputta, it's the sutta is called Lion's Roar. There's many suttas called Lion's Roar, but Sariputta does this Lion's Roar about how he could never possibly hit somebody because he's so mindful of his body, which is an interesting equation. But at the end, the Buddha says to Sariputta, because then the monk apologizes and admits he was wrong. And the Buddha says to Sariputta, now forgive this man before his head splits into a million pieces, like his head's going to explode. So this idea of being easy to admonish, like, that's an impressive quality, right? To be able to have people just like, go at you. You messed up. That was bad. That's different from admitting we're wrong. Like, admitting you're wrong, it's not so bad because I'm admitting it. Okay. Oh yeah. Okay. I got ahead of that one. I got ahead of the wave on it. But when someone comes at you, then, that's where I think the defensiveness, certainly in my case, that's where the defensiveness tends to arise. So to be easy to admonish, is a really great, just one of those phrases to carry with you, in your life. Like when, like I like these certain little mantras that we can use in our mindfulness practice. Like, okay, someone's really, admonishing me right now. Okay, I need to be easy to admonish. Can I do that? How does that feel? And then you feel it, and the pain that you're feeling is the pain of ego, you know, and you get to kind of go, okay, this is what it feels like to be attached to self, to be attached to wanting to look a certain way, to be seen as good or uh, special, or all the things we want to be seen as. And it's like, okay, this is the opposite of that. This is you're seen as having failed or made a mistake or done something unwise or stupid or, whatever. Um, and, how does that feel? Uh, there, I ran into this Irish word the other day, and I'm going to type it into the chat. And there's like an accent on it somewhere too. I don't know how it's pronounced, like Shatag or something like that. And it's apparently what they call left-handed people in Ireland, and it's I happen to be left-handed, so I have a lot of sympathy for lefties. All right, Jim. All right, we got a lot of lefties. There's an unusual number of left-handed people in Buddhist and alcoholic circles because it's kind of an insult, It's like, if you know French, you know that left in French is gauche, which is like, rude, or, right? So uh, just, I don't know how, this has nothing to do with what I was talking about. uh, but it was good because yesterday I was doing something clumsy because I tend to be pretty clumsy. I had this takeout container, and I couldn't get it to close, and I kept pushing on it, trying to snap it. My wife came up and said, I was like, this thing doesn't work. It's like there's something wrong with it. And she took it from me and went, and then she went, chitag, because we had been talking about this word. So the good thing about that, right, was that it was like, oh, okay, it's just that. It's not me. It's just, it's not self. It's just that's this quality that, like, not good with spatial things or mechanical things. And that's just like, I don't have to take it personally, you know? And it's true that when we can laugh at our mistakes, we know that that's like the most freeing thing. So this new, I don't know how many people have got this like upgrade from Apple. Thanks so much, Apple. But it's now stuck the date up in the corner, so like you seeing the date instead of seeing the time. But we're almost out of time, and I wanted to just see if people wanted to chime in. And gee, Angela, do you want to? Yes. Did you put in? Oh, okay. There we go. I hope they're seeing if you put in the Dana information and stuff like that. Yeah. Like, I always say, beware the upgrade, because there's like, I have just like a blank spot in whatever you just put in there. Yeah. Just
Yeah, it was blank and then now it appeared. Sometimes
oh,
it's
there it is. Okay. Yeah.
blank. I know. Yeah, but it's there.
Yeah. Well, I feel like admonishing Apple, but they're not very easy to admonish. Um, anyway, folks, Any thoughts or reflections on all these rambles? And really, you're all welcome to speak.
Hi, Kevin.
Hey, Jim.
It's Jim. So I just got back from a retreat at Cloud Mountain.
Oh,
It's a beautiful, beautiful place.
was that with Santa Clara?
No, it was they called it a lightly guided self-retreat.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And I was, I'm in the middle of this extended 4-step that I've been doing with a new group called Big Book Awakening.
Mhm.
And so my retreat ended up being kind of more of the 4-step, more kind of like seeing my character flaws and myself, and I never really got to a samadhi place in 7 days of sitting,
It happens.
which was slightly frustrating, but
Sure.
I kind of figured, well, this is, you get what you need.
Mhm.
But I'm just wondering, as addicts, samadhi, concentration is this like really alluring state of well-being and joy and happiness. And is there a danger of getting like kind of addicted to samadhi, um, or at least, to the striving to samadhi?
Yeah,
Um, I guess like spiritual bypassing, maybe in a certain way.
for sure. You know, I think I appreciate the correction, because I don't think that people get really addicted to it, because they say this about the jhanas, that people, oh, people will get addicted to it, and it's not. I mean, it's not the right word to describe it, right? Attached, yes, and find yourself striving for that rather than striving for insight, um, which even that, trying to split the two doesn't quite. I don't know that you can totally separate, insight and concentration, but absolutely you can get, and I've had that experience, by the way, of going on a week long, or I think it was even like a 2-week retreat I went on in 2005, where I just couldn't settle, and it's really unpleasant. It's really frustrating, uh, because usually you don't really have to work that hard to make yourself settle. Ordinarily, you just show up. After a while, it just kind of settles, and when it doesn't happen at all, oof. but but yeah, I mean, you know, I don't think this is um, only for addicts. I think it's very common that people struggle with trying to achieve samadhi or concentration or quietness. And I think even beginning meditators, this is often the complaint. Oh, I can't stop thinking, right? And so I can't meditate. So so it's really uh, there's this kind of, there's a bit of a dance, and it there's nothing wrong with, you know pushing a little bit, you know but then you have to kind of like pull back every once in a while, and and I I mean, I've had many experiences where I was like pushing, and then I stopped, and then it was like after I stopped that then the kind of sense of peacefulness arose. And the question becomes, did the pushing lay a certain amount of groundwork? that allowed then the concentration to arise when I backed off. Like if I just, like, what if I don't push at all? You know, what if I just sit down and go, okay, whatever happens, happens. I'm just hanging out. Will that, will I fall into that place organically? Or does it, you know, does it need that efforting? And I don't have the answer for that. I think it really, a lot of it has to do with present moment circumstances. And that's where you have to really tune in to like make the judgment of what do I need right now? You know, what's going to work? Because I'll find myself, you know, just off and off and off, just totally lost. And then, you know, suddenly go, wait, just stop. You know, wait a second. And like, why haven't I been paying attention to my breath? What, you know, I've just been kind of like sitting, open awareness, right? And it's just like spacey. And then I'm like, what? And then I'll just stop and then I'll realize, oh, if I just make a little bit more effort, I can focus. But I'm not sure that if I hadn't done all that spacing out for 20 minutes, that that would have happened if I had just said, oh, I'm just going to focus on my breath right now. Well, maybe I needed to space out. You know, it's very mysterious. And it's you know, I don't like putting out too much in terms of, certainly I do not want to put out anything about what should happen in meditation or even how you should meditate. Like this is the method to apply all the time. You know, to me, it's really like try different methods and then try to really tune into what's happening right now and then stick with the form, that is sit, just keep sitting, because you know stuff is going to happen, stuff is going to unfold. And yeah, maybe a week of just inventory was what needed to happen, and that's getting processed. um, yeah, so that's about all the wisdom I can give you, you know. Thank you for smiling.
Hi. I have this. Hi. Nice to see you. I think this might be relevant. So I was listening to a talk on by Munindra Ji, like from the 80s.
Yes.
And he was telling the story of Ananda, the Buddha's attendant, and
Right.
and at the end of the Buddha dies, and the council of elders says, Ananda, we want you to be on this council, but they were saying he'd only reached the first stage of jhana at that point, and it was thought that he was so distracted with, you know, doing all of his duties for the Buddha that he, you know, hadn't reached enlightenment yet. And so he understood this, and so he went down to rest on the night before the council was to meet in order to take the seat. And he rested, and that was when he finally was able to rest. The Buddha had died. He was able to rest, and he became enlightened. He got through all the stages of, I think that sort of speaks to, it is mysterious, but I don't think that would have happened unless he had done all the work prior to that, 40 years prior to that, right?
Yeah.
So it was just such an interesting story. I hadn't heard it in its entirety like that. And so, you know, someone who's devoted to the Dharma and the Buddha.
Yeah, it's that
40
balance.
years.
It's that balance. And in a way, I mean, I always think about it like when we talk about balance in practice, I think about a tightrope walker who's never in the middle. You know, there's always this kind of like, you know, what that it's tilting this way and the other way, and there's a constant process of correction going on.
Mhm.
And I think that's a really good thing to apply to our meditation practice. I mean, there are times when it's like, oh, okay, I'm in a space right now, just hang out here, you know. But a lot of the time it's like, oh, I need a little bit more of this. Oh, what? Not too much of that. Now I need a little more of that, or a little less of this, you know. And yeah, I've always loved that story, that idea that he's really striving for enlightenment, and then just when he realizes, oh, I'm striving too much, I need to just stop for a moment. And as he puts his head on the pillow, it's like the release kind of. Yeah.
Actually, in the rendition that was told, that Munindraji told, was that his resting posture was literally just his torso. He was lying down, but just his torso. He had his legs up,
Yeah.
and I think his hands and his head. So really, it was just his torso.
Hmm.
And he was, mindfully in this posture, of course. And yeah, so because I always think, oh, I'm resting, like Shavasana or something, right? Deeply resting, but it was, yeah, I just thought that was interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting. Uh,
Yeah.
That's, for those who don't know, Munindra was Joseph Goldstein's teacher, and quite a remarkable character. I sat a couple of retreats with him, and
Oh, really?
actually went to Disneyland with him as well.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and at
That's a
Disney-
great book. His biography is a great book.
Oh yeah,
His autobiography. Yeah.
oh,
Can't remember the name.
there's an autobiography. There's one that's like all the stories about him that people tell.
It's got a white cover. It's upstairs. I don't know. It's
It's
great.
upstairs. In my,
It's up
in your
there.
house. Oh, not
In
in
my
my
house. Not
I was gonna say maybe I can go up and find it.
How do you write an autobiography when you don't have a self?
That's a good question. Thank you. It's just stories, you know.
right.
Your life is just a story. You make up stories. You construct it for the purpose, for this, as a skillful means to communicate spiritual principles.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a couple of Munindra stories, but I want to go Space Mountain. Let's go Space Mountain. That was, yeah, that was interesting. Okay, folks, thank you for showing up and supporting me. My wife said I would feel better after my class, and she was right. So I feel better, and I'll see you on Tuesday.